Are the Egyptian pyramids in Giza much older than it is commonly claimed by modern Egyptologists? Were those pyramids built by a completely different nation than the actual ancient Egyptians? Or even further, is there a connection between the pyramids at Giza and the lost advanced civilization before the 9600 BC? My name is Alexander, and today I'm gonna to show you and present the evidence and the ideas that the pyramids in Giza may be much older than it's commonly accepted, even by an 8,000 years. But in order to understand the evidence and the ideas that those buildings are much older than it's commonly accepted, first we have to take a closer look at the dogma and the official theories of the building of those pyramids in Giza. So the main model of the modern Egyptologists is that those three monuments were built around 26th century BC by the three pharaohs, the Khufu, which was the builder of the biggest one, the Khafre of the middle, and the Menkaure of the third and the smallest one. But actually the evidence for it is really scarce, and actually in every of those three pyramids we have no inscriptions concerning the builders of them, and not to mention the one which is most probably a falsification by an explorer called Herodotus in the 18th and 19th century. But it is for another video and I won't dive deeper into it. But the fact is that there is no single inscription or hieroglyphic that will give us any information about the actual builders of those magnificent pyramids. The real evidence for the main theory of modern Egyptology concerning those three builders of the pyramids is really scarce, and it is about, you know, some jawbone of the mother of one of the pharaohs found nearby the pyramid, or the actual small and a single one statuette of a pharaoh found in the temple nearby the Khafre's pyramid. But all of that is really scarce and doesn't prove anything at all. And in order to accept this evidence, first we have to make the claim legitimate that those pyramids were built by those three pharaohs, the Khufu, the Khafre, and the Menkaure. And it is like, you know, imagine your mother being very famous, and at the end of their life she wants to be buried nearby some famous building, right? So imagine this is the situation with those mother of the pharaoh found of her jawbone found nearby the pyramid. Or imagine in modern times we are visiting a museum, a monument, and we've got, you know, those souvenirs, some small statues, right? And we've accidentally just lose this souvenir and just keep it in this monument, yes? And a few thousand years later we found that the Egyptologists or scientists of the future just find and say that this actually souvenir tells us of the actual builders of the monument. So as we see, the evidence is really scarce and it isn't any legitimate. Another interesting thing is that the modern version is actually taken from the Herodotus, who was a Greek historian and writer, and whose accounts are not legitimate at all. And the Herodotus, even by the modern scholars, is taken for granted that he was actually fantasizing a lot and telling actually fake news about some buildings, or just hearing from some people actual information which was later proven to be completely false. So it is interesting that the modern official version, which is one and the only truth in modern Egyptology, is based on assertions of illegitimate historian, the Herodotus, and the whole account of building the pyramids, which is actually I've read it, and it is actually a lot of fantasizing and a lot of, you know, fun rumor and probably false information, right? And it is really interesting that the modern version is based on those histories of the Herodotus, which are really not legitimate. Now let's take a look at the actual evidence concerning the much older date of the building of those pyramids on the Giza plateau. So one of the best evidence and one of the most interesting is the Giza-Orion alignment, which can be seen here, and it is about the alignment of the three pyramids to the constellation of Orion, the Orion belt, especially those three stars seen in the picture and the image above. So as we see, the pyramids in Giza are aligned to the Orion constellation in almost the exact way, but it isn't the exact. Actually, it is about 5 to 10% according to the researchers like Graham Hancock and Robert Bovell, who actually proposed the idea of much older pyramids in Giza. But this can be actually not due to the error of the Egyptian, but because during the years the constellation is gradually shifting because of the movement of the stars, of our planet, of the solar system, etc. So they've calculated, the Graham and Bovell calculated that this alignment was actually seen in this way in an era of about 10,500 BC. So about 8,000 years before the reign of the first pharaoh Khufu, who allegedly built the first and great pyramid of Giza. But it may be a coincidence, but we've got much further clues and evidence that can back up those claims. For example, the Great Sphinx, which is located nearby those three pyramids. In the Sphinx and nearby the Sphinx, we've seen lots of water erosion, and as we know in Egypt there isn't much rain, right? And actually in the geological record and the climatic record, there wasn't much rain in Egypt, in those areas of Giza Plateau, for the last few thousand years. So this water erosion cannot be accounted for the rain itself during these dynastic times of from the actual date of build of the Great Pyramid at Giza in about 26th century BC to now. So the geologist Robert Shaw and a few others, geologists and Egyptologists, claim that this Sphinx must be much older, and it could even be dated about 7 or 9 or even 10,000 BC. And the geologist Robert Shaw actually calculated it from the official records and from the water erosion on the scale of years. So it is actually very credible, but still it isn't commonly accepted because it totally shatters the current paradigm of the builders of the pyramids in Giza and of the Sphinx itself. But actually, apart from the account of Herodotus, who mentioned the Khufu, Khafre and Menkaure as the pyramid builders during about 26th century BC, the other texts from Egypt actually claim that those pyramids were built before the Great Flood had occurred. Actually, we've got two versions, I think minimum number of two versions of texts from ancient Egypt that tells us the story of the pre-medieval build of the pyramids. So the first one comes from the Hermeticism, so the philosophy and religious tradition from the ancient Egypt. The Hermetica was one of the philosophies who later influenced the Renaissance, but it doesn't matter. So the Hermetic texts from the ancient Egypt and later tells us that the Great Pyramid and other pyramids in Giza were actually built by the by the Thoth, who is commonly known as one of the gods of the Egyptian pantheon, the god of the wisdom, and he has and he's also called sometimes the measurer of the earth. And I think that it isn't coincidence that the Great Pyramid of Giza is actually located in the center of the landmass of the earth. So it means that the straight lines from the Great Pyramid of Giza, as we can see on the picture, actually cross the most area of land on the entire planet, and it is very hard actually to achieve that precision. And I think that the builders of the Great Pyramid must have known the official measures of the earth and the lands themselves, because I think it cannot be a coincidence, because it is too hard to explain this. So I think it is the next thing that legitimizes the Hermetic texts that tell us that the god Thoth, whoever he was, he could be a normal mortal, right, built the pyramids before the flood. So the next text that tells us of a pre-diluvial build of the pyramids are the Arab texts from the Middle Ages, but actually they were compiled from the local law in Egypt. So I think that they are even though they are from the medieval times, they are more credible than the account of Herodotus, right, who was telling false things. So the Arab chroniclers tell us that those pyramids were built before the flood, about 300 years before the flood, because one of the kings, called Sauri, was actually having a dream of the Great Deluge, which occurred on the entire planet. So in order to actually save the knowledge, save the text, save the artifacts and other stuff, he built those 3 pyramids in which he actually put all those stuff, all those artifacts, all this gold, etc., right? And according to the Arab chroniclers, it was later discovered that the pyramids actually possess all of those things, right? So the next thing that it can validate the much older date of building of the pyramids in Giza is that the Great Flood really occurred about 9600 BC, as it was mentioned by the Plato's story of Atlantis. So according to Plato on his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, the lost civilization of Atlantis sank forever during about 9600 BC, and it is, as we see, very nearly the date of the water erosion of the Sphinx that was calculated by the Robert Shaw, and it is very near the actual Giza-Orion alignment, which was about 10,500 BC, which shouldn't actually bother us because as we know from the other texts, the pyramids were built about a few hundred years before the occurrence of the flood. So it may be that they were built about 10,500 BC. So it is actually, from the geological point of view, it is a very credible theory that during about 10,500 and 9,600 BC there occurred a huge cataclysm, which was later recorded on the entire globe by local cultures, which to nowadays can be found in local lore and mythologies or texts, right, like the mentioned Timaeus and Critias. And from the geological point of view, we've got plenty of evidence, like for example the total extinction of species called megafauna. So those large, I think that all of us know about those large mammals like huge woolly mammoths or saber-toothed tigers, right? So during exact this time frame of the Great Flood, the sinking of the Atlantis and the building of the Great Pyramid of Giza, there was a mass extinction of the entire plant, which was actually sudden. The next thing is that during those times actually the last ice age came to an end, so it means that there were large meltings of the ice glaciers on the poles, right? So, and actually from the geological point of view, it is proven that those meltings were actually a sudden feat, right? So for example, in just a few hundred years, there was the land of total area more than modern Northern America was actually sunk, right? So this flood was actually an extremely huge cataclysm which actually affected the entire planet. That's why we should not be surprised that the texts and the actual evidence from the pyramids themselves shows us that those pyramids could have been built during a very remote epoch, or even not by the ancient Egyptians themselves, but by actual pre-diluvial advanced civilization, which was later recorded, for example, in Greece as the lost land of Atlantis, right? So, I think that it is very interesting topic, and if you want to hear more about those concepts of the last ice age, of the catastrophe, or even about the advanced technology found in ancient Egypt, which can further prove to us that some of the monuments there could have been built by the Atlanteans, right, or some other people from those very remote eras, right? So if you're interested, you can write down below and comment. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon to like the video, to comment and to share in order for other people to also get acquainted with those very interesting stuff, theories and information. Actually, one more thing I want to announce to you, that this autumn I am publishing my first book. Déjà Vu has everything already been about exactly the lost civilization before the Ice Age, about the pyramids, about the mythologies, about the catastrophes, about the degradation of civilizations and cyclical times, etc. It is a very nice book, and if you want to know more about it, you can follow me on the social media, link down below, and you can wait for the book to be published, right? So that's all for today. Thank you for your attention, and to the next video. Goodbye, have a nice day.